Hi, Michelle. I wanted to welcome you today and thank you for coming to talk with me a little bit. I'm Hilary Lefitz, as you know, and I work at a company called the College Advisor. So what I do is I work with high school kids who want to go to college. And so we work through the whole process of how to get there. But today I was thinking, because I know Mishele Vieira is an organizer extraordinaire. She's helped me, which I really appreciate. And so, Michele, I wanted you to maybe just tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got to be where you are. And then maybe we can just have a little talk about how kids can get organized, especially high school kids, and then moving on to college.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Hilary. My name is Mishele Vieira, and I own a company called Away with Chaos, and we help people get organized, whatever that looks like for them. So I say in their home, work, and life, and ideally, life is some combination of home and work, and sometimes there's more emphasis placed. One needs more attention than the other to sometimes have that life balance. And funnily enough, I got started when I was in high school, and I managed a family who had 3 kids, and the parents had these really busy jobs. And so I helped keep the kids on track with their homework, with their school, organizing their space, et cetera. So, and that later on in life became a business, which I've been doing for almost 20 years, and I absolutely love it. So thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. And I really appreciate what you do, because I think when we tell kids in particular, just get organized and do this time management and all of that, we're assuming they know what that means. And I think they need a little more explanation and handholding than that. And so for some people, it comes naturally, other people, it doesn't. So in particular, what I was thinking as I see kids going off to college, what I thought would be something helpful for them is starting to get more organized in high school, whether, ideally as a freshman, skills they can learn as they go through high school, definitely junior and senior year, especially when they're getting ready to go through their applications and there's so many moving parts to it. So what would you suggest in making their organizational system a little easier so everything runs a little smoother?
Well, I think part of it really begins with kind of knowing who we are, meaning, are we a morning person? Are we a night? Or when's the best time to be doing our work, right? So some people like to stay up late. Some people like to get up early and do before school. Maybe people do it after school. So it's kind of, I think, knowing that and honoring it, and to as much as possible, sticking with it if you can get your schedule to allow it that way. So knowing when you can be at your best, I think is kind of easier than trying to push a boulder up a hill. So accepting how you do things and when's the right time. Also, where do you do things? Right? Okay. When do you like to study? Where do you like to study? Do you need more noise in the kitchen area, or do you need complete quiet in your room? Do you need music? Do you need some ambient a noisemaker to go? And just kind of knowing how you want to do it so that's going to have you work at your best.
Okay. Well, kind of tagging on to that, and I don't know if this is in your area, but I know a lot of kids want to go in their rooms, and what do they bring in with them? Their phones, right? Which I know can be a huge distraction, not just for teenagers, but everybody. So how do you address that at all when you're working with someone?
Well, I think that some of them need their phone, and as they start to be in high school, then I think some of it is kind of letting them learn what's going to work for them. And if having their phone for a little bit might work for them and they can still get the job done, there's going to come a time when they're going to be at school and they're going to have their phone anyway. So if it's easier for them to have it and they can still get it done, then maybe it's worth it. I just see when too many rules are put on kids in general, then it kind of makes them a little bit more resistant. So if it becomes really a challenge and they're not getting their work done, then maybe some boundaries have to be placed around it. But, I think phones are kind of here to stay. So I know it's hard to pry them out of their hands sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I know you were talking about like study styles. Is that what you were talking about, of just the early morning?
We were talking about how do kids set themselves up to win, right? And so if they're really kind of a night owl, then maybe that's the best time for them to actually do their homework, as opposed to, some parents have this rule, like you have to do your homework right when you come home from school and get it going. But maybe they need a little bit of downtime and a break, or they need to exercise or do something else to kind of reactivate their brain and then go into doing their homework later in the evening, if that's kind of who they are.
Okay. Actually, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just think that, this kind of junior, senior year is setting them up for the beginning of college time when they're going to be on their own. And so it's kind of like the launching pad where hopefully they've worked with you and they're already have applied to schools and they have some options for themselves. And so I think kind of the remainder of the junior year and the senior years is kind of about figuring out how can they be their best student. Okay. So that they can excel once they get to college.
Okay. I was going to say I had a perfect example. I have twins, and when they were in high school, they would come home from school. One of them would sit down immediately and get her work done, and the other one needed to go chill out in her room and then did it at night. So I never thought about it in the context of they each had their own styles, but you're right. And as a parent, it's kind of hard to let go of that sometimes and understand
I hear that a lot. And I think the parents, it's just a different time, because I think when you and I went to school, our parents dropped us off and, in August, September timeframe, and then said, see you in November for Thanksgiving, or maybe we went home for the Jewish holidays or something. But there wasn't that same connection that parents have to their kids now, where they're pretty much tethered to them by the phone. I can say from my own experience, because I happen to work with, a lot of young adults who might fall into the category of, they're struggling. And some of it, they now are telling me it's because their parents did things for them. So I think starting to allow the kids to be who they are and, to bring out the best in them and help them find their way, I think is really a nice service to do for kids. So they don't have to hire me later on.
Okay. So it's basically mom and dad backing off, giving them some ideas, and then it's up to the kids to implement it.
And teaching them, because once they get to college, there's nobody saying to them like, hey, did you do your homework? Or, when are you going to study and all that? In the same way that parents I see are doing it with their high schoolers now, right? So teaching them, I know at my college, then a lot of kids ended up on academic probation because all of a sudden there was so much freedom that they had never had before. Right? And when do they go to class? How late can they stay up? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? And so I think kind of loosening the reins a little bit before they go to college, I think makes it, it kind of desensitizes that excitement of this freedom once they get to college.
Right. That makes sense. So do you also, and I know this is an individual thing, but for instance, I've always been a pile person. And I know some people like things all put away. Are there any recommendations of, how tools that kids can use other than figuring out who they are? Are there any planners that you would suggest, either hard copies or on their phones? If somebody works with piles or whatever it is, how to keep that organized so you're not spending half your time looking for stuff?
Well, I think piles can be completely legitimate. If someone's a piler, then great. But we just want to have piles. So maybe using like binder clips or something and a Post-it tab to kind of organize their piles somewhat by the class or by the subject matter or something. Okay. As far as a tool for homework, then I get asked a question like this a lot, kind of like, what's the best planner? What's the best app? Right. And ready for the answer? The best one is the one that you will stick to and you will use. So I think nowadays we're seeing a lot more things on the computer. There's a lot of different apps. I'm not going to recommend any one in particular. I think it's like find the one that you resonate with, but try to avoid jumping, to the new shiny object and like the newest app, because I would rather see somebody just get with one and make it work for them, as opposed to like continuing to jump and find the next best one. If somebody's more kinesthetic, they want to handwrite something, then that's perfectly fine too. I don't recommend really a hybrid or two different systems or two different calendars, because I think there's a lot of potential for mistakes and errors. Right. But I think that there's a lot of wonderful, great. In fact, one of my colleagues, she has a company called Order Out of Chaos, and she does a lot of planners and things for kids, as well as for kids that are neurodiverse as well. So that's one avenue. But, I know a lot of people are using the Google apps. Some people are using their iPhone, but it's just, for me, it's more about the consistency of looking at the data and then going in and using it. And also taking advantage of what the teachers or the professors are providing for them to help them stay organized and manage their workload. Okay, that sounds good.
I've also heard, and again, I don't know if this is your area, but I've also heard that when you're in class, it's better to handwrite notes versus typing them in terms of keeping all your notes organized. What do you think about that?
I've heard that as well. And I think certainly in my day that was the case, but we didn't have, computers were barely coming around.
Yes.
And so I think, now the typing is almost the equivalent for some, digital natives as it was for writing. And again, I think it's more of a style thing, but I still think that there's something to be said about physically writing it. And that's kind of like that muscle memory. And, I don't know that there's enough data to say that typing gives the same thing, the same benefits. Right. But I think that typing or texting, on a device is something that people are so used to that I think that there's probably going to be more of a preference for that.
Sure. And then you mentioned before, and the same thing goes, I guess, then with a desk of just organizing it the way you feel
like having, so you were kind of talking about, what things near you and how to have it set up. I think that there's kind of two types of people. There are the people that are what we call the stuff out people. So they like to have things near them. So they might have highlighters and they might have their computer, have a drink, and they have like everything kind of at their fingertips, and they like to have it out, and they might have a bulletin board with their assignments posted or dates for exams or things like that. So there's almost a certain comfort level with things around them. So we call those stuff out people, and we'll see stuff out also often in their bathroom counters and in their kitchen, if they cook. And so they kind of like that familiarity of the things around them in order to get down to work.
Okay.
Then there are the stuff away people. They can't concentrate unless everything is put away. So we know those people as well, right? So they have their desk really neat. Some people take I used to work with a guy who would take that spray air duster stuff. And before he could get to work, he was an accountant, and he would spray everything down. So there could not be one speck of dust, not one thing, and that was kind of his form of getting to work. And once everything was put away and perfect, then he could focus. So I'm a stuff out person. So I know when I was studying, I needed my highlighter, my drink near me, the book, because if I was to get up and have to get the highlighter, then that might have meant that I goofed off for another 10 minutes before I came back to actually start studying again. So kind of, again, knowing what our style is and having the things, but typically we think of if a captain flying a plane would have all the instruments near them that they need. So maybe they need their computer, maybe they need a certain textbook that they're looking at, or they have other tools that they're working on depending on what they're studying. So having that near them so they can sit down and get to work. Now, but they also, some people might be doing it on the couch, right? So they might not have a desk situation. So, some people go to the library, so they might set up a portable backpack system to take with them with their tools to the library, and that might include their earbuds for their ambient noise.
That's a good idea. I know sometimes kids study in their beds also, but it's kind of hard to have everything in there with you. Right. Well, and you probably fall asleep.
Right.
You had mentioned along the way of kids who are neurodiverse, and I think it's a challenge to begin with, whatever age you are, but especially when you go off and you don't have, somebody there monitoring you and constantly checking on you and guiding you. So do you have any special suggestions for?
Well, I think it's really taking advantage of whatever resources are available, meaning some kids, it might be accommodations. Some kids might be sitting in on the professor's office hours more to kind of, get that extra information. I think probably telling, professors that, a little bit about what's going on and what you might need to help you succeed. And that can be a time when parents get more involved, is just to kind of help to get them onto their way so that they can operate at their best. But and again, it might be creating the right environment, because sometimes we know that kids who are neurodiverse need a little bit of noise around them, right? Versus others can't handle any noise. So what's going to be the right scenario for them? And hopefully they've been working on that, in high school, to kind of know what's the optimum circumstances. And then that can be passed on to the college professors and, any kind of programs that are available for them, so that they can be their best and really succeed, which I think there's a lot more opportunity now and resources available to kids who are neurodivergent than there were in the past. To really help them succeed.
And teaching them how to self-advocate for themselves, I think, is one of the biggest, not just say, I have problems learning, but being very specific about what that means so they can get specific types of help.
Yeah. And because it just happens to be how they're wired, but we know certainly that they can be incredibly successful in the right environments. And so it's just kind of setting them up to win for that. Okay.
Anything else that we haven't really talked about yet? I mean, I'm sure we could go on and on about organization and.
No, I think, I think it's all about, kind of a trial and error, and just knowing that if something doesn't work, then, try it for a while. When, be careful of what I mentioned was the bright and shiny object syndrome, but to know that things can be a little bit tweaked and modified so that we can set things up to be our best and to really succeed.
Okay. Well, good. And I know if anybody ever gets stuck, they can find you or find me and try to get a little more help. Any books that you would recommend?
Any books that I would, how about ADD Friendly Ways to Organize Your Life?
Okay.
Just as we're talking about neurodiverse people, then that's one of my favorite books on that topic.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mishele.
Thanks,
I enjoyed talking with you, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Bye.